Welcome to Town Talk, another town manager community update. This on Title V regulations, some proposed new regulations coming out from the state. Town Manager Els is with us today to talk a little bit about Title V and what these new regulations might mean for Barnstable and a public hearing held right here in Town Hall. Town Manager Els, nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the basis. We have a lot of residents that may have moved recently to Barnstable, not realizing that they have a septic rather than sewer. Tell us really what a Title V septic system is here. What does that entail? How is it different from sewer?
Okay, well, sewer is typically a pipe that takes wastewater from your home to a centralized facility where it's treated. And in Barnstable, portions of Hyannis and very small portions of Barnstable Village are sewered. So far less than 10% of the population of Barnstable has sewers. For the most part, everybody else has Title V systems, which are, Title V refers to the section of the law, the regulation, that our Board of Health administers relevant to these on-site wastewater disposal systems that each of us individually have. So the majority of the town has some form of a septic tank and a leaching pit, in their backyards.
Okay.
So that's what Title V refers to. That's a very general description.
Right.
So,
So Title V regulations coming out of the state, there's some proposed new things coming out. I'm going to have you explain really what's going on. Again, there's going to be a hearing, I believe it is in December 5th at 6 p.m. at Town Hall with the state. But I know in your town manager update to town council, you went through quite a bit of the information that is contained in these new proposed regulations. So take us through what this proposal may be doing and how it might affect Barnstable.
well, first of all, you're going to provide the links so
Absolutely.
anybody who wants to know when the hearings are, know how to comment, etc.
Yep.
You'll help our public with that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So actually, I'll jump way back and say that more than 20 years ago, we began to understand that Title V systems, these on-site wastewater systems, which really focused on separating solids from liquids, and then you pump a tank, a solid tank, that has a pipe out of it into a leaching field. You pump the solids that come primarily from our body and take it to our wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of people will say, well, I don't use the treatment. Yeah, everybody uses the treatment plant. It's just you're either a sewer customer or you have your septic tank pumped and it goes to the treatment plant where we have to manage it, treat it. And then the liquid goes out into the leaching field and into the ground. And that's what Title V was all about, making sure that you kept both of those out of exposure to humans. And you were concerned about bacterias and viruses, etc. Up north, like Cape Cod, it's all sand. It's pretty easy to do. Up north, where I grew up, north of Boston, it was all ledge and glacial till. So that stuff would come out, seep up to the surface, and so they got sewered years ago.
Right.
Now, when we began to understand the impacts, especially of that liquid that passes through, and it's water from our sinks and showers and toilets, but in our toilets there's urine. Urine's the primary source of nitrogen. Nitrogen is like a fertilizer for our saltwater embayments. It's not reduced at all. So when that goes out into the environment over years, and we begin to see, which we have here on Cape Cod, dense, small lots, lots of these systems, lots of nitrogen. The whole south side of Cape Cod, the whole south side of Barnstable, are having real challenges in their embayments with nitrogen loading. So that kind of sets the stage for a discussion about Title V. I just said that only like 10% of the town, less than 10%, I want to say it's even less than 8%, is actually sewered. So the other 90% have these on-site systems. It's getting the water in the ground. It's allowing the solids to be pumped, but it's not reducing nitrogen. It's also phosphorus, but we'll do a different program on that. And now emerging contaminants. So
yep.
there's another area to talk about. But back to nitrogen. So we've been looking at this now for about 20 years. Over a decade ago, we began to delineate, okay, how much load is too much in our embayments? We've done that. We've gone through the regulatory process, established what our target is to get to, and we've put out and had a lot of discussion in our community about the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan and sewer expansion. But that's to be done. Nitrogen is still going in through septic systems into the ground. Still causing the same problem, and will for decades, even with a sewer plant. So, DEP has looked at, and this is statewide, but it's really important here because of how few people are sewered and how easy this stuff moves through the soil, the sand, and the saltwater embayments. They've looked at this regulation and said we need to designate nitrogen-sensitive areas, and then we need to have each community put forward a plan for how they're going to reduce nitrogen in those nitrogen-sensitive areas. That's what this proposed change does. There's a lot of information here. All I can say to our residents, and I did this at council, it's my call to action for our residents to at least try to understand what's going to occur. We had lots of participation and interest in the proposed and now approved sewer expansion program and the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. Please pay as much attention to this change. This is as significant of a regulatory change as I have ever seen in my almost 40 years on Cape Cod. It's going to have significant impact on us. And it's coming fast, and comments will be due by mid-December, and I think by January you're going to see some form of this move forward formally. A lot of questions. And so, in a nutshell, that's what's going on. Right. We're available to try to answer, but I can only tell you, I feel like looking at the proposed regulations, we just are touching the tip of the iceberg, and the impacts of this are massive. And we're trying to understand a whole host of areas. Never mind talk with our Board of Health about how they're going to be able to administer these regulations once they're modified. So,
right. And some of these proposed regulations are dealing with the structure of the septic tank itself. From what I understand, from what I have read, that there are other alternative septics out there that they're looking at. But there's also the watershed question in this regulation as well, that there's a watershed permit. So explain that a little bit. I know you don't really understand.
How long do we have, Paula?
But again, as people start to investigate this, as we give them the links to go look at this, having this discussion with you gives them those keywords to look for when they're reading these regulations.
So the opportunity to define to obtain a watershed permit, and the watershed permit is focused on defining where the watershed is to an embayment system. And then within that defined watershed, we know how much nitrogen needs to be reduced. We may just know that we have a nitrogen problem and action needs to be taken. all of that was in place before. And the way that something was designated as a nitrogen-sensitive area was one of two ways, either by the municipality through its Board of Health or by the Department of Environmental Protection. That didn't readily happen for a whole host of reasons, and it really wasn't that they were ignoring this nutrient loading issue. It was trying to figure out how to do this in a way that could be implemented successfully and managed successfully and achieve what they really are looking to achieve. So I think one really important thing, and I haven't even gotten to the physical Title V system and how, that's another discussion about how those might be modified or improved to better reduce nitrogen. I think the thing everybody needs to stop and think about here right now, sometimes I think we talk past each other on this issue, is nitrogen sensitive. Yes, the whole south side of Cape Cod and certainly Barnstable is nitrogen sensitive. Do we need to reduce nitrogen? Yes, we do. Can innovative alternative on-site systems do that? Yes, they can reduce nitrogen. And we're still trying to work collectively to refine that and improve it and ultimately make it even more usable out there. But what we're finding in our modeling is even with that, it's not enough. And that's when we get to looking at sewering versus innovative on-sites. Now, do they reduce nitrogen? Yes. Does it help the environment? Yes. Does it solve the problem of getting it to this regulatory target of the TMDLs that have been established in Pompanesett Shoestring, Three Bays, Centerville River East Bay or Lewis Bay? Our modeling says no. So what I mean by talking past each other is that people will say, well, we can do this rather than sewer. Well, we really can and meet those regulatory targets. And that's what the CWMP is focused on.
Right.
A means to doing that is reducing nitrogen. So we all got to get on the same page here, because these are going to be a really important part of long-term managing this issue, certainly in Barnstable, but again, across the Cape. Now, these regulations that are coming down aren't, for example, for the same time period that we've identified within the approved comprehensive wastewater management plan that we've been going into now almost the third year of implementation. That is focused on getting us to or below that targeted regulation on those TMDLs and the embayments. The states come forward and said, we got to start reducing nitrogen. Now, we think that, and there are a lot of unknowns when you read through these regulations, if you've taken the time, they talk about, okay, over 20 years, getting to 75% reduction. Maybe the innovative on-sites can do that, but we're being held accountable, the town of Barnstable is being held accountable to get to or below the TMDL, not just to reduce nitrogen.
Right.
And so we need to be careful that as we go forward with this, depending on what gets approved, and I assume it's going to be very similar to what's being proposed by the state for these modifications to Title V, that in the interim period, you may see people having to install innovative on-sites. And then in the long term, us coming by and saying, well, that's wonderful, you reduced nitrogen, but it wasn't enough. And now you have to sewer. That's basically where we'll be. Unless something significant changes in the ability to remove nitrogen going into these embayments with technology other than a centralized wastewater treatment facility. So we're very concerned that our residents are going to have to manage or be involved in this twice.
Right.
And it's unclear how that will be administered under these, nobody's done it yet, so it's very unclear. And so that's why this is so significant. Now, bring it right home to now. Okay, this gets approved in January. You own a house, and you're on the south side, and we don't have and approval. There's actually a process spelled out in the new regulations that say, okay, we've got an approved CWMP, compliant with federal law, approved by the state, approved by the Cape Cod Commission. We've got this plan. Can it be translated into a nutrient removal plan? Maybe. And so once so let's say it all works out that it is, then can we just do what that plan says and all the properties that aren't planned for sewer not have to do anything? Unknown. So now you live in that area and you want to transfer your property once these regs go into place. What are they going to say to you?
Right.
Well, there's interim steps. I'm imagining, based on what I've read, that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do more modeling. We're going to have to prove that collectively at the 20-year, 75% removal mark that our CWMP allows us to do that. And then we're going to have to make the argument that the CWMP should stand. Even if you're outside of the sewer area, you shouldn't have to do this because we will meet that target. Okay, but what happens for 3 of the 4 embayments on the south side of Barnstable? Pompanesett Shoestring, 3 Bays, and Lewis Bay are all shared with other communities. Where are they in their approvals? This isn't about political boundaries. This is about natural boundaries.
Right. Watersheds are natural, and we share them with.
And so how will this regulation be administered? Now, in Barnstable, let's say the CWMP is great, and it can be transferred over into a nitrogen removal plan, and therefore the way we say it in that plan is the way that it'll be administered. And if you own a property and you're outside of there, you won't have to do anything more than what you're currently doing, or having a current system, Title V system, that's compliant with the what would be prior regulations. Well, the only embayment that's totally in Barnstable is Centerville River and East Bay. So what happens when you don't know what Sandwich is doing and Mashpee has a version, but it's unclear where they are in implementation? Does that hold up all the properties within there, or are they going to administer it in a way that is Barnstable's share of that load? All to be determined.
Now, how do you measure that?
And once it's adopted, let's say it gets adopted in January, and you try to do this in February, how are you going to be able to make decisions? So these are the questions that we're asking, and our public needs to be aware of this. And what ends up, at a kind of a gross level, what I hear is an absolute no, don't change them, or yes, we support nitrogen reduction. Well, I think we all probably support reducing nitrogen or anything that impacts our water resources. So, okay, I understand that. But what are the impacts of doing this, and how will it be implemented, and how will our resident go on with all the things that they do in life, including property transfer, once this is in place? What will they be required to do? And they come to us and ask those questions, and it's the state that's promulgating this regulatory change, and we want to be helpful. That's why our residents need to be watching this really carefully. Ask a lot of questions. We'll do our best to answer, and it needs to be on their radar.
Okay, so we have a meeting in person and remote, Barnstable Town Hall, 367 Main Street. You'll see that up there on the screen, December 5th, 2022 at 6 p.m. And there's also a way to leave public comment. Written comments will be accepted until 5 p.m. on December 16th, 2022. That information is also on your screen. Very important, we'll have links that you can follow to read these proposed regulations. And as Town Manager Els has said, ask questions.
Absolutely.
And show up.
We'll do our best to answer them.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for explaining that. It was definitely helpful, I think, to our residents, and hopefully they'll get some light reading in as they go through the...
I think it'll prompt more questions than answer, but Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.